Hello, my name is Jacob, and thanks for joining me. I'm going to start by addressing 3 points and then launching into what I'm calling the prehistory of mathematics. So first, let's take a look at what these 3 points are. These 3 points are going to be, first, what do I hope to accomplish in this series? Second, what am I focusing on? And that is, what do I mean by mathematics in the title of this series? And thirdly, what themes will we keep seeing pop up in this video series? All right, so first of all, what do I hope to accomplish? Well, so I just finished a crash course on how to make these videos, in which I had to teach myself how to do this this last spring of 2020 so that I could start teaching all of my classes online, something I've never done before. Also, I'm looking ahead at a summer staying in, no traveling, no vacation, no Gen Con, and I have a lot of time. So I'm going to take these skills that I learned this last semester, and I thought I would apply to something I really love. I am a math professor, very interested in the history and philosophy of math. I read a lot of it, and so I thought I would just start making videos and create the story as I understand it of all of these things. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that I'm a big person on context. You hear these every mathematical thing was created by someone, and I wonder who did this and why and when and where were they and what was going on around them. And so as a result, some of these videos might be entirely historical, like the second half of this one is entirely what I'm calling on the prehistory of mathematics. It's all history. And some of them are entirely philosophical. Video 12 is going to be entirely on Kant. All right, but the reason they're in there is because I think they're necessary to give the context of the story of the mathematics that I'm trying to tell. So if you could just stick with me on that, then we should do fine. Next, what do I mean by mathematics? Well, I don't mean 2 + 2 = 4 or learning how to keep track by knotting ropes or stuff like that. If you go to a math professor and ask them, what is a math major's first real class in mathematics? You'll get a lot of different answers, but pretty much everyone will know what you're talking about. They might not be able to articulate it, say what real mathematics is, or they might be able to anyway. But there does seem to be a distinction between what math majors are responsible for and like the arithmetic and algebra you learn in high school. And so it's this that I'm focusing in on now. What do I mean by that? Well, I can articulate that, but I'll get to that in the second video. This video is going to be about covering the prehistory and setting the stage for that second video, in which we start and I talk about what do I mean by real math. Secondly, what are the themes that we're going to be looking at in this video series? Certain themes are going to come up again and again. Let's take a look at that. So, got some PowerPoint here. So, what kind of themes we're going to see? Themes that keep popping up. So first, the rational versus the mystical. Math is like at the core of our scientific understanding of the world. However, if you think for a few minutes about the nature of mathematical objects, numbers, triangles, lines, all of that stuff, the more and more mystical or otherworldly they sort of seem to get. It's kind of confounding. And the history of the struggle to take that and make our understanding of mathematics and the objects at the heart of it rational and not mystical or magical is going to be a struggle that we're going to see coming up again and again throughout this video series. Another theme is the question of what is mathematics about? What is the really topic? What is it that mathematicians do? It might seem easy, but once we get into what I'm calling real mathematics with the Greeks, we'll find out that this question keeps seeming to come up again and again, and everybody has different answers and disagrees with everyone else. Another theme would be the nature of infinity. Infinity is causing people, the concept of infinity and dealing with it causes people lots of problems for a long part of history. And our understanding of infinity will change, and our ability to deal with it will change through time. And the third thing that I didn't even plan this, but as I was writing these out, just kept coming up again and again, is we keep seeing mathematicians toggle back and forth between having extreme rigor and saying, hey, if it works, it works. It just keeps going back and forth, and we'll see that throughout. All right, so the next thing I would like to do is show you the periods we'll be covering in this video series on a timeline. because I just like to visualize things like that. So let's go to that.
All right, so I know it's difficult to see on this camera, but I created here a timeline of pretty much the human civilization. Over at this end over here, we have about 3500 BC, which is when there was the first signs of settlement and civilization in Ethiopia, or in Mesopotamia and in Egypt. And then over here is up to 2025, 25 because this is, my units are 25-year intervals on this timeline. And I just want to give you an overview of the sort of space of times. Now, the one I'm saying is the first mathematician, Thales. It was also the first philosopher, so this was sort of at the time of the start of Greek philosophy. And that occurs right around here, right around 650. Now, let me just point out here that this timeline here is 8 sheets of paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this 650 BC, oh, sorry, here, 650 BC, is on the 4th sheet of paper. That means more history has passed, human civilization history has passed from the start up to Thales' time than from Thales' time to us today. That's just pretty remarkable for me. And so I think it's going to help us out to understand kind of what was going on in this period here and how that set up what happened here. Now, as long as we're here, let me just outline what time periods we're going to be covering. So episodes 2 through 7 are going to cover the Greeks. That's going to be from Thales here up until about Euclid here. So this period of time in this whole stretch here is sort of the Greek classic age. That's going to be episodes 2 through 7. Episode 9 is going to start with Copernicus, who's way over here, up to there. And episodes 9 through 18 will cover from Copernicus up to the modern time. And I skipped over episode 8, or video 8. Video 8 is going to sort of go over what happened in that gap here, from 300 up until about 1500 Copernicus. So we're going to go chunk here, and then a couple videos to fill in the historical gaps of what was happening there. All right.
Now you see what we're going to be doing. Let's go to the very beginning. Let's say the spreading of hunter-gatherer. Really the beginning. At the start, humankind spread out from Africa, hunting, gathering, and so forth. And then at some point, agriculture caught on. Nobody knows how. It could have been that, people are eating stuff they really like, and then they suddenly discover as they excrete the seeds that, hey, these really tasty plants are growing all over where we go to the bathroom. Hey, that's the start of agriculture. Or it could be that people just learn stuff they like. They learn to plant seeds and do it and make it up manually by that. It could be that people found really good hunting grounds and became stationary and invested in a place. And when the hunting grounds weren't good anymore, they were forced to invent agriculture. Something that might be surprising is that the hunter-gatherers were healthier and seemed to have a somewhat easier lifestyle than the agricultural. So it seemed to be a healthier lifestyle. So for example, hunter-gatherers worked less. Agriculture was extremely labor-intensive. Hunter-gatherers had a more well-rounded diet. Agriculturists usually worked and ate around certain special crops, and they often suffered deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, because their diet wasn't as well-rounded. Also, agriculturists were more susceptible to famine through the crop failure because they usually focused on one main crop they did. And if there was a blight on that crop, they had a big famine. Hunter-gatherers, if one of their kinds of berries, if there was a blight on the berries, they just didn't eat those berries and ate something else. So why, then you might say, did agriculture spread so rapidly and displace the hunter-gatherers? Good question. The answer is in the numbers. See, this is about mathematics. So I don't know if the numbers I'm going to use right now are exactly correct. I think I remember them correctly, but if not, then let's just say it's the general idea. So let's say 25 hunter-gatherers require 100 square miles, like what we see here on this grid, to sustain themselves. Well, then agriculturists come around and they might need like 1 square mile down here. Oh, we can't see that. Do this a little better. Let's do this again. All right, 1 square mile down there to sustain 100 hunter-gatherers or 100 agriculturalists. They can all grow. Now, your hunter-gatherers take a look down there and they're like, well, that's only 1 square mile out of 100. I guess we can let that go. And there's 100 of them and 25 of us. So, and then a generation later, all of a sudden, the agriculturists cover 2 square miles with 200 agriculturalists, and the hunter-gatherers start seeing the writing on the wall. And eventually, despite the fact that agriculturalists were less healthy, had to work harder, were more susceptible to famines and all of this stuff, it's just by these numbers that they eventually were able to displace the hunter-gatherers. All right, so when the agricultural revolution occurred and spread throughout the globe, things were much wetter than they are nowadays. They were able to just plant things, and the rain was able to make it grow, and that worked pretty much for everyone. The Sahara Desert used to be a big savanna. I mean, I have a picture of the savanna with the grasses and the trees and the elephants and stuff. That's what the Sahara looked like. Then about 5000 BC, the climate got a lot drier, and the savanna, the Sahara, then became a desert. And people had to migrate and move around and try to look for a way to sustain themselves. And it seemed like the nicest place to carry on that lifestyle would be in river valleys. River valleys had two main benefits: the river and the valley. In the river, you had water, all this concentrated water flowing by you, and it was fresh water. It wasn't salt water from the ocean. So you could then make an irrigation, and instead of relying on rain from above, you could water your crops that way. And the second part is the valley. It was good for defense. Lots of people, lots of really hungry, desperate people out there. If you have a nice little garden there, there's a lot of people that want to come and take it away from you, but you can have defense. So lots of people came and started settling in river valleys, and that became very dense. And just like if you take a lot of uranium atoms and pack them in really tightly, they get a nuclear explosion. You take a lot of migratory people from coming in from different areas and pack them all really together tight enough, you get an explosion of culture. And that's pretty much what happened. Civilization, the culture that resulted in these river valleys are usually noted by the fact that everyone had to sort of work together and coordinate to do all this irrigation, by the fact that society became stratified, that you had the people in charge and the people below. It seemed to be a fallout of the organization. And it finally became worthwhile for someone in charge, with a lot of people doing what he says, to take over someone else's lands. As people became packed tighter on it and made it more profitable or made it more fruitful, it became desirable to take over. So we had a lot of conflict there. Now, in early time, we find 5 great river valley civilizations crop up. Well, let's take a look at that. So here's a map of the Eurasian continent, and the first great river valley we see cropping up is the Nile River Valley over here. Here's the Nile and a little more. Over here, what we have is the Euphrates over here and Tigris over here. And so this is really considered one river valley, and we're looking at the area in between those river valleys. We have the Indus River Valley over here. And then over here in China, we have the Yangtze River Valley, where a lot of civilization came up, and the Yellow River Valley up here. So those were sort of the 5 main areas where civilization really got its start. Okay. Let's see. Whoops. Where did we leave off here? There we go. In this talk, we're talking more about Western civilization. So we're going to focus on the Egypt River Valley and the Mesopotamian River Valley right now. Egypt was divided into the lower and upper river valley. The lower river valley was the delta, where all the rivers split out, and then once they reached the ocean, there's a big sort of swampy, fertile land there. And then the upper river valley was the Nile River as a long, thin line, cutting through pretty much a desert, which had fruitful lands on either side of it, and then barren beyond that. That was united by Narmer in 3100 BC, and Egypt was broad and agricultural based. Lots of people spread out of a huge area, lots of farming, and Narmer conquered the whole area and was able to unify into one large political entity. And then in Mesopotamia, the culture looked a little different. There were a lot of very dense, large urban city-states. Some cities as much as 50,000 people way back when even. And so, and then they were sort of conquering each other. So whereas now the population was broad spread out, agricultural based, in Mesopotamia, we had these individual, strongly urbanized cities, city-states that would be fighting and gradually conquering each other back and forth and so on and so forth with all of that. Now, these were the two big civilizations for thousands of years. Everyone else understood themselves in the area in the context of these civilizations. So, for example, if you think about it in the Old Testament, we have to understand how the Jews fit into the Mesopotamian civilization. Abraham was from Ur, which is one of the city-states, and how they fit in with the Egyptian civilization. There was the Egyptian captivity or slavery. So, we could take that as an example of how civilizations at the time had to understand themselves with respect to these two great civilizations. And they were the main things. This is the setting at which we'll take a look at when we start mathematics up in 700 BC. All right. Now, something else to understand at this time was the nature of magic in those two areas. Egypt was known for its healing magic, and Mesopotamia was known for its astrology. Now, here, let's take a look at the nature and understanding of magic at the time. It was used like science. It was an attempt to control the world, like how we try to control things with science. It was not necessarily otherworldly or mystical or confusing or spiritual or whatever. Let me give you an example. Let's go to Egypt. Let's say you do experiments with different poultices, putting it on people's wounds or rashes or something to see what works and what doesn't. Well, we might think that sounds kind of scientific to us. Now, let's say they do an experiment with different magic charms that they put around your neck, and they see which ones of those work and which don't. Well, we might say that seems kind of magical, mystical. They wouldn't have seen a difference between those two kinds of things. They're both just an attempt to take control of illness and disease and heal people. Also, Mesopotamia developed a lot of astronomy and trigonometry in order to develop its astrology. There's a joke. There's a bunch of students in the first day of astronomy class, and a student in the front row raises a hand and says, "Excuse me, professor, what's the difference between astronomy and astrology?" And the professor says, "Lots and lots of math." And all the students get up and leave. That doesn't quite hold in ancient Mesopotamia. There was lots and lots of math involved in their astrology, and they really developed it. So there was a lot of learning at that time as well. So then around 1200 BC, there's a real big collapse of civilization in the Mesopotamian region. It's not really agreed upon why there was. There's a lot of interesting theories on that and such. Egypt and the current big Mesopotamian civilization at the time, which I believe was Assyria, did survive the collapse, but they were hard hit by it. And a lot of the other smaller civilizations around in that area were wiped out at the time. Right before this time, in 1200, is when the Homeric epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were supposed to have taken place. So right before then is when you had the Greeks versus the Trojan War and all of that. Right after that period is when there is the start of Greek civilization as we think of it. That is when Homer wrote the Iliad about the previous time. So the Greek civilization started coming out of this dark age from the collapse in 1200. All right, so let's see. Now, something interesting about the Greek world at that time, coming out of the Dark Age collapse, is that it wasn't just in Greece, in the Greek peninsula. Let's go back to that map. The Greeks were a seafaring race, and they did a lot of trading. And there was a lot of Greek, I'll use green for Greek here. There's a lot of Greek colonies in Sicily. So this was Greek, and southern Italy. So down here was Greek. Of course, Greece was Greek. The western coast of Anatolia, which we call Turkey today, was Greek. The western coast of the Black Sea around here was Greek. And so this was all, and there's even a Greek colony or Greek city down here in Egypt. So all of this area was considered Greek. And an interesting thing is a lot of the Greek math and philosophy didn't come from Greece itself. It came from Greeks, it came from the Greek world, but it didn't come from Greece necessarily. So for example, Pythagoras was in southern Italy and Euclid was in Egypt. So that is sort of where was wait, I got it. I articulated this better in my notes here. The real innovations came not from the heartland, but from the boundary lands where the cultures came into contact with each other. All right. So now we're ready to start looking at what I call real mathematics. Okay, so the next video this video was about the history leading up to the Greek civilization and sort of setting the context there. An important thing is my discussion about magic in Egypt and Babylon. We'll see where that comes from, or goes. The next video is about a conceptual revolution that was occurring at the time during what historians call the Axial Age. This was actually a revolution in perceptions in religion. During this time, a lot of the great religions of the world, Jainism, Buddhism, classic Hinduism as opposed to Vedic Hinduism, Confucianism, Zoroastrianism, and a lot of others all got their start at that time. We're going to look at the nature and characteristic of this conceptual revolution and how Greek philosophy, and I'm saying real mathematics, was an outgrowth of those religious innovations. So hopefully you find that interesting and tempting, and I will see you then. Thank you.